Okay.
Welcome, everybody. Very special episode of Sudbury Politics Show. We've got two very special guests. It's myself and Danielle and Joshua, who are usually behind the scenes on the show. Hey, guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Jeff.
It's great to have you guys on. Danielle, with some help, Josh, wrote a pretty spectacular blog on their experience helping with the Hillary Clinton campaign. We're going to find out if she won. Or if they changed the tide. But I'm going to hear a little bit more about that story because it's a great story of campaigning, and a lot of important lessons came out of that campaign for anybody that's looking to run. So, Danielle, Josh, what made you decide to go down and campaign for Hillary?
Well, I think for me anyway, and Josh, you can jump in on this, but just watching the whole campaign unfold and the excitement around potentially having a first female president, that's something that was kind of important to me, and that was one of the things. And for all her faults, I do really respect and like Hillary Clinton. I like her policies. I like how progressive she is. I love the experience that she's had, and then it was also this element of there's no possible way we could even give Donald Trump the chance to win the White House. So why not go down? That's kind of where it was for me. And then Richard sort of nudged us into going down, as he seems to do with everything else that goes on with us.
Yeah, I had been
give us the push off the bench sometimes.
I'd been kind of watching from a distance and, seeing everything expand and seeing the Trump rallies and just really getting, maybe not afraid, because God, for the life of me, never thought that he was going to win. But I couldn't just sit back and not do something to try and turn the tides on election day if I could. And of course, the nudge from Richard to say, we've got a group, there's a van, get in, let's go. And
losers, we're going campaigning.
That's my line.
I know.
But it seems like a big step for a lot of people, right? It's not like we're even a border town. And you guys went reasonably deep into the U.S. You went down to Ohio. Did you think at the time that you were going down and there was a chance that Hillary was going to lose?
I don't think, no, honestly. I mean, right around that time, like right before we left, the polls had started to shift a little bit. She was still out in front, but there was a discernible change in his polling numbers, which kind of gave me a little knot in my stomach. But honestly, like in all honesty, I never in a million years thought Donald Trump would be elected as president. It just seems so far out of the realm of possibility because we have been watching the campaign and hearing the things that were coming out of this man's mouth and seeing the scandals arise around him. Not that Hillary didn't have her own, but I mean, I think my thought anyway, was who in their right mind would elect this man president? He's no way a capable leader. He doesn't appear like he could be a capable leader. He's a reality TV star that has no political experience whatsoever. He has high shock value, okay, but that doesn't translate into leading a country. So who in their right mind would hand over the reins to the U.S. to a man like this?
And we were a group of very progressive people and, objectively speaking, he was just not the right choice. He doesn't come across intelligently. He has no political experience. He just seems dangerous. And to this day is still very dangerous and is not any more intelligent or well-versed in politics than he was before he was elected. So it was never fathomable that, sure, he would get some ground, but never that he could win. There was never a thought in my mind that we would be sitting in a bar, watching the fire start on that night.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting things for a lot of people to learn in politics is, the poll numbers were actually right in that election. The popular vote was almost dead on to what the polls said, But the pollsters were still saying there's a 10% chance that Trump wins with this, because at the end of it, it boils down to a lot of weird math on who actually wins the race after the votes are counted. And Trump won the electoral victory on it because the weird math worked for him. And, you know, a 1 in 10 chance is the same chance as somebody winning a free coffee at Tim Hortons third roll at the rim.
Mm-hmm.
It happened to all of us, but we lose a lot more than we win. So, you know, when the pollsters are doing this, they're giving odds. They're not picking winners or losers at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's noble of you guys that, you know, with a race that close and you believed in, you went and did your best. At what point going down there did you start seeing support for Trump, or things that started making you think, you know, this isn't the race that I thought it was?
I don't think it was so much on the way there. We're kind of skipping ahead in the story a bit, but it was really when I think we started knocking on doors that you'd see these big Trump signs and 2-on-1 lawn, but you look down the street and just down each side, they're all there. A lot in the way that you would see Harper signs or Trudeau signs in 2015 that you wouldn't have expected to be there otherwise. And then getting to doorsteps of people who should have been Democrat supporters and should have been voting for Hillary, who would use language that I shouldn't repeat on the podcast, telling us there's no way in hell they're voting for this woman. And that was in the first couple doorsteps. That was, you know, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the one too was the one that struck me honestly is when we crossed the border, when we had first crossed the border. And there was the border services agent, and he asked us why we're going down. And we said, we're going down to work on a campaign. He's like, well, who are you working for? And we were kind of like, we debated in the car. We kind of all looked at each other and thought, like, does it matter who we're going for? Like, do we need to tread carefully here? Because that even kind of brought up like a little, you know? And we said, okay, well, so he asked us again, and we said, well, we're going down to work on Clinton's campaign. And said again, does that matter? And he said, no, they're both idiots. So that right there, and I mean, I know not everyone is super engaged in politics, and I guess to a lot of Americans, which I don't think any of us realized going down there, neither was a super desirable choice. And I think that was the first kind of shock to us anyway, that sort of us watching from afar saw a lot of good in Hillary and thought she would be good for the country, but there may not have been as many Americans who thought that as well. And they were maybe a little bit more sour on her than we had realized going down.
Yeah, I know. I was down there in March ahead of the election, and I was surprised by the amount of vitriol Clinton carried with her. I talked to people, was down in Vegas and talked to people from all over the US that were visiting there. And I was shocked, genuinely, like how much people really, really did not like her on a very emotional level. And Trump was this kind of disaster joke that might happen. Hillary was the devil, like in a very real way.
She like elicited like a visceral reaction from people.
Yeah.
Like, it was shocking, honestly.
I think though it was in a way that they were told to feel it for a lot of people. They were told to hate her. They were told about the 33,000 emails that got deleted that never materialized to be anything. But you're told to hate it by the man who's supposed to represent you up on the podium. You know, he's your everyman candidate with billions in the bank. So I think they hated her on a fundamental level that they were never really told what that fundamental was.
Like he kind of demonized her without any substance behind it, honestly.
Just sheeple, as some might put it.
So both of you have some experience here in little old Canada, talking about, you know, participating in campaigns. Josh, you've worked on campaigns locally. Danielle, you've worked on campaigns locally and on the East Coast. You guys have worked with a lot of campaigns. Usually Canadians kind of look at it and say, when I go to the big country of the US, I'm going to learn lots of lessons. What lessons did you guys learn when you got to Ohio?
When your data is shit, so is your ground game. I mean, we knew that already, but I think that was like one of the biggest points that drove home for us was the data was absolutely terrible. And like we've worked in campaigns before where maybe the data hasn't been perfect and our voter contact numbers haven't been on point, but this was bad. And I don't know. I honestly don't know what lesson I learned down there. Really.
I think it seemed to me almost that this is election day, right? We weren't there for the ground game leading up to it. Who knows if they had better organization in the weeks leading up. But when we got there, it seemed like they'd already given up. There was nobody else. So we did more polls that day with 6 of us than it seemed like any other volunteers had. And I hope to God there was more than 6 people out that day.
We didn't see anybody though.
Yeah, they looked like they had no resources. There was no people. It was empty. It was an empty campaign office at 9 a.m. on an election day. It doesn't make sense. It's not reasonable.
Yeah. So, no, but even the campaign office itself, though, like I talked to you guys about this too. Like it didn't look like a normal campaign office. Like we've been in different campaign office to varying degrees, and there's usually like a segmented office, right? Like you've got your voter contact area, you've got your e-date area, you may have a communications, like depending on the size of the campaign and how the campaign office is broken out. But it was basically just this big room with a couple tables up at the front with sort of like greeters, I guess you could call them, and there was no polls marked on the wall. There was barely any maps up on the wall. Like it just looked like sort of this big empty storefront that people were kind of hanging out on. And even then when we were given our canvas sheets, it was like, well, hang on, let me go dig in this filing cabinet to find them. Or let me go dig through the pile of random papers on my desk to find them. Like there was, to us anyway, it seemed like there was very little organization and I don't know if it was a symptom of maybe not taking it seriously, or it was either not taking it seriously because they thought that there was no possible way that Trump could win, or not taking it, or just basically accepting defeat at that point. Like the campaign manager gave us her car that day, basically. Here, random 6 Canadians, take the car, go on an adventure. Like, it was just the whole experience was odd. Like it was unlike any other campaign that I've worked in before. And I've been in campaigns for various durations. I started out as a volunteer just a couple of days a week and then going in on E-Day. And then I've been the E-Day organizer for 7 days a week for 7 weeks in the 2011 federal. But it didn't feel like anything I had ever felt before in a campaign office. There's usually like a buzz in the campaign office when you go in there, like for any sort of election geek like us or, campaign vet who's been in there. There's a certain sort of energy that's in a campaign office when you get in there, and there was none of that. It was flat. It was completely flat to me. I don't know what you think, Josh.
Well, it's not like we just showed up, right? We weeks in advance had to sign up online. So we're going to be here on this day. We're available for this many hours. So at the bare minimum, why weren't their packages pre-prepared or something printed out that day or a few days in advance saying, okay, 6 people have volunteered their time. They've told us they're available for, what did we give them, like 10, 12 hours? And there was nothing prepared. Like Danielle said, they were just pulling papers together to try and give us something. Maybe they didn't think we meant it. Maybe they thought we were full of shit. Obviously, their central support had eroded.
Yeah.
By that point, there was nothing.
Yeah. So a lot of people that watch the show may not have actually campaigned or canvassed. What's that data supposed to look like? Like, what should you have in your hands when you're out canvassing?
Well, you're supposed to have your identified marks. So the whole voter contact segment of the campaign, their focus is on identifying your supporters and marking them out. Every sort of party has a different way of doing it. In the NDP, we have a 1 to 4 scale, and with 4 being your highest. So those are the people that are your guaranteed supporters. So those are the people you want to make sure that they actually go out and vote. If they say they're going to vote for you, it's your job to make sure that they actually do. So when we talk about canvas sheets, it's basically a list of identified Clinton supporters. They may not be 4s, they may be slightly softer, but they're people who have sort of, I guess, shown promise, I guess you could say, as supporters, and people who are likely going to vote for you. So the whole point of going out to pull the vote on E-Day is to take those sheets out with you and get to the doorstep and make sure that the people who said they're going to vote for you actually do it, because saying you're going to vote and actually doing it are 2 completely different things, and saying it without doing it doesn't mean shit, and it doesn't win elections. So that's that was our job, basically, to make sure that those identified supporters were getting out. But like we said, the data was awful. Like
I heard one fun story about a certain lady you guys went on a hunt for.
Stephanie. Josh, tell us about Stephanie.
Oh God. So.
Oh my God.
Most of the day, and so I was with Danielle and Lisa. We'll put up a picture that the three of us got. We had a lot more fun than the other group.
We made our own
lament. We have to make our own fun. In such a dreadful situation, you have to have your own fun. But so the girls have been holding the clipboard and going to the door, or I've been holding the clipboard rather, and they've been doing the talking, and we've had a good flow going, and we get to this one house, and they're like, Josh, you got to go to the door for this one. I don't know why. What possessed them to send me to this particular door, but we had failings in finding a particular person by a certain name and different last names, but the first name was Stephanie every time. And this one doorstep, I get up to the door, I knock, the woman opens it, I said, hi, we're looking for Stephanie and making sure she's gonna get out and vote today. And she starts screaming in my face, you're the third person who's been here today. Stephanie doesn't live here. Get off my doorstep, and just like obscenities. And
a few more expletives.
And we ran away from that at that point. Which is unbelievable that Stephanie and to this day.
But it happened again. But it happened again. It wasn't just that time. There was Stephanie. I think there was at least 3 times that day where we went to a doorstep asking for Stephanie and got shouted down. Well, Josh did. Josh always somehow seemed to be the one asking for Stephanie and always seemed to be the one shouted down. So it kind of became the joke amongst the 3 of us that if we had actually managed to find Stephanie, maybe things would have been different. So we kind of blamed this Stephanie that we actually never did find.
I'm going to
all of our problems.
I blame the 3 of you for not finding Stephanie.
We tried.
I think if you would have found her.
If I could have found my way out of my poncho, maybe we could have found her. But
speaking of, I got a picture of us once we've landed in our rain ponchos that I can pull up here.
That was at the end.
Richard wants to cut to that with the camera. We were very miserable by this point in the day, and I think that is quite apparent.
More or less sums it up. Yeah.
At this point in the day.
Yeah.
On your scale of 1 to 10, Hillary versus Trump, where were you guys?
2. It was bad. It was getting bad. Like we were so excited when we got out there. We started, with like this hope and optimism and naivete, maybe, I don't know, but
misplaced hope.
And I think probably, what do you say, Josh, by like maybe 2:00, 2:30, the wind started to come out of our sails a little bit. And then by the time I think 5, 6 o'clock rolled around, which is I think around the time that picture was taken, it was like, well, shit. Like that's basically.
We got to a point where we just shut down.
It amounted to.
The rain was pouring. I don't have the embarrassing picture of Danielle. Once her poncho had ripped and she had to tie it together and she was sort of trying to get her way out. But I just imagine poor little Danielle with her poncho and her clipboard underneath, and she's trying to read it and mark off houses while we're getting poured on. And that was around the point where we said, you know what, maybe we should give up. Let's go back to the office.
The weather kind of mimicked our feelings. There was a lot of pathetic fallacy happening on that trip. I think you could. Absolutely. I think you could say. So yeah, we threw in the towel just before the polls closed, I think, and headed back to the campaign office to start calling.
So that's another interesting story. You guys get back to the campaign office and you decide to do some phone calls. Mm-hmm. And this was another kind of data chaos moment. How did that go?
Well, we got back, and it was the polls. I think we were maybe about 40-ish minutes, between an hour or so away from the polls actually closing. And they gave us this fresh set of canvas sheets and said, "Okay, you guys can go back home." We said, "There's no way we're going to get." We said, "Where are these people, or where are these streets?" And they told us and said, "Well, there's no possible way for us to get to all of these people before the polls closed." So they said, "Can we start calling?" And they looked at us like we had 3 heads. Like the idea of getting on the phone to call voters was like a completely foreign concept to them. And again, it goes back to the campaign office. Like in every campaign office that I've been, we've had a phone bank, we've had a voter contact phone bank or an area designated, and there was none of that there. So the 6 of us kind of grabbed the sheets and sort of mapped it out and divvied it up, and the 6 of us got on the phone for that last half hour or so by the time we had straightened the mess out that we got, because none of them made sense at all. And so we spent the last half hour or so. And then there was, so typically too in our elections, we have scrutineers in the voting locations, right? So as you have people on the doorstep, you also have people in the voting locations themselves, and they're sort of keeping track of which of our supporters have gone in. So there's sort of a checks and balance against the canvas sheets versus the other data set that the scrutineers have, and you're able to sort of coordinate throughout the day and say like, yes, you know, Stephanie is a supporter, but she's already been to the polls and voted, so you don't need to contact her again. And there was none of that. There was no back and forth. So we had no idea if any of the marks that we had hit that day had even gone to the location and actually cast their ballot. There was no flow of information back and forth, which is something that we're really not used to, because you're always updating your canvas sheets, right? And there's always that risk too of like over duplication. So then you start pissing off voters, and they're like, well, you know, you bugged me 6 times today. I said I was going to vote for you, and I'm so irritated with you at this point. To hell with it. I'm not doing it. And we didn't know. That was the thing. We had no idea who'd actually been to the polls.
Yeah, one of the things I find interesting from your story, from other stories I've heard from people that I know in the kind of election business in the US, is Hillary was supposed to have the A team, the best of the best behind her, and all of Trump's people were just kind of sitting it out, and Trump was supposed to have, you know, this ragtag team of people that said, oh, I guess I'm not doing anything else this season, I'll help them out. It doesn't sound like they had the A team on the ground though.
No, even I know we but definitely crossed paths with some Trump supporters. They had their blue windbreaker jackets on, but we only, I think, saw them the one time. There was 4 guys walking together with clipboards, and after that, that was it. That was the only presence we saw in Mentor anyway.
Yeah.
No door knockers or anything else.
Like even like the campaign team itself that was like in the office. So that county that we were in Lake County. So we were in Metro, Ohio, and it was Lake County. And that's sort of like the county that has predicted the way that the state is going to go for the past 100 years. And it's the sort of so goes Ohio County, I guess you could call it. So we were expecting a little bit more. And I know it was a small county, but there were other races other than the presidential race going on that they were trying to win the seats for. And the team that was in place in there really didn't seem like they had much experience. Maybe, I don't know, maybe our hopes were a little bit too high going in there, I'm not sure, but there were very few people even in the office to begin with. We didn't hear if there were zone houses out there for us to go check on and report to, or other bodies in there. It seemed like a skeleton crew, and there was no contact from head or central campaign either until when we got back after the polls had already closed. There was a younger gentleman who came over, but to us it didn't seem like they brought their A game, like you said. Like they didn't have the A team out there. They didn't have any team out there, quite frankly. We were the team that was out there pulling.
Yeah, the stories I've heard from the ground, from you guys and from others, is it's hard to say whether they gave up or whether they just didn't think they had to try in the first place. Given the size of the venue Hillary booked, I'd say it's more likely the latter. I don't think Trump or Hillary thought that election was going to go the way it did, just based on the rooms they booked, and based on the crowds that showed up. So, you know, given that, you know, how much of this do you think was just a loss by Hillary's team as opposed to Trump winning this?
I think a lot of it. I think a lot of blame can be laid on the doorstep of Hillary's team for the way that they ran the campaign. I think you're right in that. I don't think they took it seriously. Like, I mean, and it's hard to lay full blame on them at the same time too, because you're watching this campaign and you're seeing the things that this man is doing, and you're listening to the things that are coming out of his mouth. And who in their right mind would think that someone like that would be elected president? Like, it was almost like, here's the White House. There you go, Miss Clinton. Like, it just seemed out of the realm of possibility that something like that could happen. So maybe they didn't take him seriously enough. Maybe they didn't bring their game enough. I think they could have done a lot more damage to him than they honestly did. I think they let a lot of things slide by in that campaign that they could have nailed him to the wall for a little bit more. But that being said, he also seemed to have this like Teflon suit on. Everything just seemed to bounce off this man as well. So I don't know. I really don't know. I think there's certainly some blame to be left at their feet, but I'm not in their shoes. I'm not in their position. I was not in the central campaign. I'm just going on what I saw where we were.
Yeah. And again, like we were the progressive group, right? So for us, if a candidate had said something along the lines of, you know, grab her by the pussy, that's an immediate write-off. They're done. That campaign's over. Send the team home. You know, thank you. We'll collect our votes now. It should, no rational person, in my opinion, as a progressive voter, should ever have voted for this man to be president. It's just not rational. There's no sense behind that decision.
Yeah, one of the things, and I would have been guilty of this as well, because, you know, after the Republican nomination, I was like, God, they're nuts. This guy can't win. But you just watched him walk over, what was it, 11 U.S. Republican candidates that all thought the same thing, that this guy has no vote. And nobody learned the lesson that whole way through.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
And like, I mean, clearly I'm not a Republican supporter, but like, there were some good quality candidates. There were some relatively good Republican candidates on that stage. And like you said, he bulldozed the hell out of them somehow. And you know what, hearing you say it, you're completely right. That should have been the first lesson to them to take him seriously. And they didn't.
I'm going to take that clip of "You're completely right," make it my ringtone.
Yeah, of course you are. I'm so shocked. So don't get used to it. It's never happening again.
I think when you're up against folks like, you know, Jeb Bush and Ted Cruz, what are the chances that these guys really have the ability to take on someone like Trump, who appeals to the lowest common denominator, and he speaks about as eloquently as the people who actually voted for him?
Yeah. So the reality is Trump won. I'm sure that was a gut punch at the end of the night after traveling down there and doing all of that work. What point did you know it was over?
I think for me, when we were sitting in that little like hole in the wall restaurant, and Richard, there was the table of five of us. Josh had gone somewhere else at that point, but there was Richard and I at the end of the table, and then the other ones around, and we were watching the counts come in on the screens. And like I wrote sort of in that article, like I said, I felt like I just wanted to sink further and further into the floor, honestly, watching those counts come in. And I remember Richard and I kind of looked at each other and we locked eyes for a second, and we just knew, like, they weren't good. The numbers weren't good, and you could just feel it. And we kind of crouched like to the end of the table so the other ones wouldn't see us, because they hadn't worked on as many campaigns as we had, and I don't think they saw the writing on the wall as clearly as we did. And we kind of ducked a little bit low, and he looked at me and said, "She's gonna lose." I said, "I know." And then it was, "Do we tell the rest of them?" And we said no. They were just so like hopelessly optimistic. But and I don't think either of us really wanted to. I know we kind of knew it was happening, but when you actually vocalize it and say, like, guys, it's over, it was hard to say that. yeah, it was like, I can almost remember the exact moment. I think they were talking about Florida when they were talking about the camps coming in from Florida, and we kind of looked at each other and went, shit. And that was pretty much it for me anyway. I don't know, Josh, what your sort of
I had
was.
rejoined you guys, I think, by about that point, and it was pretty clear early on, and Wolf Blitzer was doing his best to make it seem like Hillary was still in the game, but it just it was done. Yeah. And even after that, after we went back to the campaign office, and everyone's crying and upset, and they're sort of accepting what's happened, we go back to the hotel room, and still, I mean, I know Nagiri was hanging on for a while, and I don't think Nina was quite ready to let go, and you hear, oh no, there's still this date, but it was
yeah. And like we said before too, right, as soon as when you start saying, well, there's still this date, and there's still this date, and there's still this date, you kind of know that it's over when you get to that point, when you're sitting there and you're grasping at straws, and you're grasping at numbers, and you're just trying so hard to avoid the inevitable. It's over.
So what are the lessons that you guys get out of that? Coming back, you guys are going to be involved in more campaigns going forward. What did you learn out of that experience?
I think don't take anything for granted. You can never take, really, like, you might think you have it in the bag, but polls can be wrong. Polls are not an absolute. And I think that was one of the biggest ones for us. You can never take anything for granted. There's no such thing, I think, to me, and what I learned that day was like a sure election. Like, you really can't. And I hate to sound like a jerk here, but don't underestimate the stupidity of a voter. Like,
the candidates they're voting for.
Right? Like, that was, to me, like, for a logical, progressive, reasonable person, I could not believe the stupidity of the voters in electing that man to office and thinking that he would be good for the country. I think yeah, like I said, not to sound like a jerk, but don't underestimate the stupidity of the voter and the potential outcome, I guess.
Yeah, that's... I pretty much mirror those remarks. Definitely never assume you have it in the bag. I think about 2015 in Canada, and we were in the Sioux, Richard and I, and we knew we were dead. But when the results started coming in, and just the entire East Coast turned red, it was never in our minds that could happen. And were the resources deployed properly, Susan Marie should have been abandoned. We almost left halfway through that campaign. I'm not saying that.
Richard,
never underestimate the intensity of the candidate's family. Yeah, that's all I'm saying on that front.
Yeah, no.
But it's, yeah.
Don't go there.
Never underestimate the stupidity of the voter is absolutely correct. Or the logic that they apply to making their vote. Because, we are progressive voters, and we think logically, and they probably think they think logically as well. But you can prove over the last 4 years he's done more harm than good, and he should not have gotten that win.
So I think there's another story on the other side that's harder for, I guess, the people that weren't happy with the outcome to understand is sometimes the underdog wins, and sometimes if you're that underdog, you pull it through and you find different ways to get through. So if you're campaigning and everybody's telling you you're going to lose, there's always that hope. So, given everything that you guys went through on that campaign, would you go back? And will you go back on the next election?
Not to mentor.
I don't think they'd have us back. Even if
I don't think so either. Kind of burn that bridge on the way out.
Along with everything else behind us.
Yes.
I would go back. I don't think it's going to be realistic to go back for this November's election, given everything that's going on with COVID and
fair enough. Like COVID aside,
but like wipe out all the shit that's going on. Absolutely, 100%. I would go back in a heartbeat. I think it's important, and I think that was one of the lessons I learned there. Is you can talk about wanting to make a difference, and you can talk about wanting to change, and you can talk about wanting to help out, but you have to actually do it, because words are just words unless there's something behind them. So for me, if I'm going to sit here and I'm going to rail about Trump for the past 4 years, like I have been, in his absolute idiocy, then I'm not going to just sit on my ass and watch it happen. I'm going to do everything I can to try to fix it and try to stop it. And that I would go back in an absolute heartbeat.
I think we weren't even across the border back to Canada yet, and I was talking about going back in 2020 for that election. Again, whether that's reasonable or not, if we can't go, I'll be watching very closely and ready to, speak to the results on election day. But absolutely, I want to bring democracy back to America, as I've been saying for the last 4 years.
Put the fire out.
Show with a fire extinguisher. And
I guess that's one question I'm sure quite a few people have. How would you feel if Americans were coming to Canada, the NRA is coming to Canada to help knock out progressives?
I mean, I get the thing, like the sentiment behind us. I think at one point somebody had accused us of sort of interfering in the elections and going down. But I mean, I think it happens all the time. I think they do come up and help out. I think there's other bands of Canadians other than the 6 that we went down with that go down and help out. I think if you believe in something strongly enough, there's nothing wrong with going and trying to fight for it, regardless of where it is. If you in your heart, regardless of what side you're on, I mean, I'd agree with what the NRA preaches, but that's fine. But I think if you believe in something strongly enough, then you are within every right to fight for it. And I think there's no better time to do that and no more important time to do that than in an election. That's
In terms of Canadian elections, the Conservatives have the resources they need to win. And if they don't, with the money they bring in, with the people they can buy to do the work for them, and they're losing to progressive candidates, where's the disconnect here? Why are they losing? And it's not going to be having someone come up from the States to help them not win. They're losing because they're losing. Where
they win sometimes too.
Well, they do.
Yeah, they do.
But I'm saying
we have a premier that might be a conservative.
What rose-colored glasses are you wearing, Josh?
But having people come up from the States to help them isn't going to turn the tide for them one way or the other. They have the resources to win, whether they win or not. They don't need extra help.
Realistically, I don't think the 6 of us really thought that we were going to turn the tide going down there. Like, it wasn't, I really don't think 6 people knocking on doors in Mentor, Ohio were going to change.
I think at least 2 of us thought so.
Okay, well.
I think one of the areas that comes out of this and what you guys did and is campaigns take a lot of time. They take a lot of work. They can't be won in a weekend. But it is those people that matter, right? It is the fact that, you guys went down and tried to help. That help might have pushed it over the edge had 20 more people went with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ohio was lost by not a lot of votes. It was a really tight election, and a lot of people sat on their hands for it. Me included. I didn't go down. It is people that change elections. But the other thing is you got to put the work in, and you got to put the work in now.
Yeah.
Don't care when you're running, you got to start putting that work in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Anything else you guys want to add about the adventure?
No.
No.
We
Stephanie,
hope to not see a repeat. But it was honestly though that when, yeah, it stuck with me honestly. Like that, it's been 4 years, and there are parts of that trip. It was a short trip, but it is seared into my brain forever, and I will never forget that fire in Buffalo. That honestly is one of the craziest things I've ever seen, and it just perfectly captured everything we had been feeling that entire night. Like when I remember we went back to the hotel room, we were sitting in the hotel room watching the cats come in, and we had this debate of, can one of us stay sober enough to leave right now?
Seriously though, we thought the border was going to get locked down.
Like we were like, what is tomorrow going to look like? And that is terrifying. A bunch of 6 Canadians sitting in this, like, no offense to Richard because he booked it, Fleabag motel. Like, sitting there in this motel thinking like, do we need to leave right now? Like, what is tomorrow going to look like? And is tomorrow going to be so scary that we should probably seriously think about getting our butts to the border now? But I don't know. That whole trip was.
Yeah. The fire in Buffalo. You guys saw, what was it, a factory fire?
It was the Bethlehem Steel Plant. I think it was a big warehouse that was part of the Bethlehem Steel Plant complex. Like we said, we joked that it was set by all the highly educated women and minority groups in the States railing against his win, but it was huge. It was huge. Mm-hmm. And it was, yeah.
I'm sorry to do this. I have it just on my phone here, but that's we could see that for miles and miles and miles before we got to the border.
Like the sky, I'll never forget the way that the sky just darkened.
Yeah.
It just, to this day, I've never seen anything like that. It was just like this encroachment of darkness. And then we saw the flames, and that was literally the last view that we had of the US before we came back to Canada, was the 6 of us looking out the rearview mirror of that, not the rearview mirror, sorry, the rearview window of that caravan, and literally seeing a fireball. Like, accurate. Like, that was literally our last. And then for me too, the border guard, when we came across back into Canada, he asked us why we were there, and he handed us back our passports, and he said, "Oh, why were you guys there?" He said, "We were working on an election campaign," and none of us wanted to admit whose campaign we were working on. And he said, "Can I ask who you were working on?" And we said, "Clinton." And we kind of all downcast, and he handed us back our passports, and he said, "Sorry guys, but at least you get to come home." And that's what kind of stuck with me too, was at least we got to come home.
Well, it's a fantastic story, guys. I've gotten to know you just a little bit, both of you just a little bit in the past year. They were lucky to get you down there to help. Both of you are stellar in that arena. So hopefully you can find a way to, give some help on the next round. I know you'll both be politically active in other races locally or nationally as things go. Thanks for taking the time to tell the story tonight, and we'll be back with a regular episode again next week.
Thanks for having us and letting us do it.
Yes, thank you for letting us tell the story, and Stephanie, we'll see you in 2020.
You finally find her.
Or not.
I'm on a mission. It's the only reason I go back to